Hi everyone, welcome to Art Talk. My name is Laura Horovich. I'm the co-owner of Carousel Fine Art. Today we're here in our Miami, Florida location with Florida-based artist Cayla Birk. We're going to get to know her a little bit as an artist and her creative process, as well as the series that we're exhibiting this month.
Thanks for having me, Laura. Appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for coming. So let's just get started from the very beginning. How old were you whenever you realized, maybe from your peers, that you had a little bit more creative intelligence than they did?
That's a great question. So not to be cliche in saying that I always felt creative, but at a very young age, I think that creativity just kind of sparked a lot of my interest. I was very drawn to anything creative, not just arts, but theater, dance, music. I was always very open to just the creative side of things. I would say one of the first experiences at a very young age where I realized, okay, I am going to want to do something creative with my time and in my future career was probably in my more middle school years, probably in like 7th grade or so. We had quite a few different competitions and things that kids could enter into. And I designed a bookmark for a scholastic school project.
I love those projects.
I know, right? It's like these little things that you don't think are going to shape you as an artist, but I designed a bookmark that then got chosen by the entire, Florida state school system to be put into all these different books for kids in their libraries. So that was probably the first moment where I thought, oh, okay, I like creativity, but does creativity also maybe like me? Of course, we're brought up at a younger age to not really be aware of what others think so much. But as you get older, you kind of remember these little anecdotes. And I think about how those things have shaped me. I always liked being creative, but I didn't know if I necessarily was creative, if that makes any sense.
Right.
So that was kind of the early onset. And from there, I think I really nurtured it and then moved forward.
Amazing. And I think that's so interesting because, like you said, when you're young, you don't really know about how your future is going to be shaped.
Absolutely.
And these little moments that could actually snowball into, this greater ideology and transformative years that would shape you as who you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I went to a school of the arts for my high school years as well. And I actually didn't go for visual arts. We had 5 majors, dance, theater, music, visual arts, and communications. And I actually went for communications. For a long time, although I liked art and everything, I grew up around a lot of other talented people that I felt were more naturally talented. They had the raw experience, the raw talent. And from going to, it was called Dreyfus, the School of the Arts, I grew up seeing so many children, and I should say teens really, that were unbelievably talented visually. They could pick up a pencil and replicate something instantly. For me, I could get to that point, but I had to work for it.
Right.
I kind of thought of myself as more of the ideas person. I knew that I had a strong mind creatively. I could think of the ideas, but I thought I should maybe be the delegator of those ideas to others that were more adept at visual arts. And life just has a funny way of kind of showing you that you're wrong. And here we are, and I'm in my 8th year of professionally being a full-time contemporary fine artist.
That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. And so in this journey, did you have any teachers that were kind of maybe advocates towards this journey, or do you think that they were more on the opposition side? Because sometimes you have that one teacher that maybe sparks this interest, or maybe they can deter you from certain things. I'm just always curious to know this as well.
Okay, so it's great. And I always do believe, my mother really raised me and my brother and sister to value education. Granted, that wasn't always in just the traditional sense of school. Just education and learning was always something that really pervaded us in our home. It was always a good thing to constantly be learning. And with that does come a lot of memories of really great teachers. I would say there's 2 from my younger age. One who was actually an art teacher. Her name was Sue Smith. And she was just like so incredible. I ended up taking after school classes with her and stuff for visual arts, and she just kind of always made me feel like even when I made something that I knew wasn't good, that it's okay, this was part of the process. So she was just really amazing.
And that was at what grade?
So I started, and by the way, I'm sorry, I called her Sue Smith. Her name is Sue Carlson. I probably was in like second or third grade, and then she would host these arty parties outside of school that you would go and join other kids to paint and everything in her home. And she was an artist during her life. You know, she just ended up becoming an art teacher later on. And they were called the Van Gogh arty parties. This was like her thing. So that started probably when I was in like second or third grade and went all the way till I was in eighth grade. And then by the time I went to high school, you know, things had shifted a little bit in terms of going to a school of the arts. So it was already there. But I would say a teacher that I would really like to highlight, her name is Mrs. Spiro, Denise Spiro. She was this amazing Greek woman who was my homeroom teacher for fifth grade. And she was someone who really showed me that creativity in itself, just creative thought, could be art. It didn't always have to be visual or dance or singing. It was just the idea of being creative and how you project that to people really can sink in. So she just did the most amazing things. You know, she taught us about like the ancient Egyptians embalming, and she would like come in dressed as a like mad scientist, and she'd put together spaghetti and everything and make a fake body. Like she was just very creative as a teacher. She made you interested in things that you weren't. And I think from there, I realized, okay, you can take anything and make it creative enough to where people are interested.
Right. How fabulous. What an amazing woman.
She ended up becoming the principal of that school, even though she was just a teacher when I first started. So proof is in the pudding at that point.
100%. And I was going to just also ask you, is there anything from your childhood that shaped you as an artist outside of school? Was there any life occurrences that you want to touch on?
Yeah, no, of course. Yes, of course, because with creativity, there's the good things and there's also sometimes the negative effects of life that do still spawn you to be creative, which I find to be beautiful. So I would say, funny enough, when I was probably about 8 years old, I had always expressed an interest in art. And my mother, who was a single mother who raised my brother and sister and I, she really let us believe that we could do anything we wanted, which, you know, under certain pretenses in certain homes, you're not always allowed to express yourself in that way. And my mother said to me when I was 8, honey, you can be a famous artist one day. And I looked at her and I said, no, Mom, artists don't make money till they're dead. And so in her mind, she was like, what kind of 8-year-old am I raising? You know, like, what? Who told you that? Like, why do you think that? And we always joke about it now, obviously, now that I'm in my 30s and I have become an artist. It's just something that I think society kind of put onto you. So I have to say, one of the most supportive parts of my life, it's not so much an experience as a presence. That would be my mother. She was always someone who supported my creativity and my dreams. Even when I didn't want to be an artist, you know, for a long time, most of my younger life into college, I wanted to be a creative director. So once again, the delegator of creative ideas. I wanted to work in advertising and I wanted to be the brain behind everything. I wanted to help brand and do these big things for commercial companies, but I, once again, wanted someone else to be the person who physically created that. I just wanted it to be the ideas coming straight from me. I felt that I had that stance that was a little bit higher than others. So my mother supported me in that journey as well. It just happens that here we are, and I ended up being not only the delegator, but also the implicator of such ideas.
Incredible. She sounds like an incredible woman.
She's very dynamic.
And what is her background? I think you touched on it earlier when we were chatting before we started recording. She is, or you are a first generation American.
Yes.
And she came here from Lebanon.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that, you know,
experience
from your point of view.
Well, so when you're growing up, I think that you kind of sugarcoat everything. It's only as you get older do you realize how harsh and difficult things in the world can be. And I guess part of the reason I didn't really realize the difficulties and adversity that my mother probably faced is because she never really led on to that. You know, now that I'm older and I've heard the stories and I've experienced some of it with her, I think that it's really incredible that I now see a woman who came here from, you know, a third world country, and she, when she first came here, she was 14 years old. And she did every job under the sun, is what I'm told, you know, getting paid under the table and everything else, you know, it's what you have to do for the American dream.
Right.
And as she got older, she always, you know, my mother wouldn't claim to be an artist in any way, but the truth is, she is, fully 100% has so many creative bones in her body, it's ridiculous. She built homes when we were younger, and then was a commercial and residential real estate agent and broker. And then when the crash happened in the market, she then decided she wanted to start a landscaping design company.
Which is also incredibly artistic.
And everything kind of always had to do with the home, like building spaces and everything, which eventually it wasn't just residential for her real estate, or I'm sorry, for her landscaping company. It became commercial as well. She was doing big projects, and that in itself, outdoor living design is creativity in itself.
100%.
You have to have the spatial recognition to be able to look at something and go, okay, it can look like this. And that just comes so naturally to my mother. It's one of these things that still to this day absolutely blows my mind. Like, she can walk into an empty room and say, you know what we can do? And she'll completely envision.
It's like painting a mental picture.
Literally. And she also happens to create these spaces and experiences that people feel when they're in a certain space. So she's very creative in her own right. And she's kind of always been a woman who can recreate herself. As I said to you, she built homes, and then we had the real estate crash. Like, anytime an adversity has come to her, I think she's found a way to not only like jump over that adversity leaps and bounds, but then to surpass what anyone ever thought was possible.
She just pivots into something else that would.
Very much so. She's just so strong in that way, and she doesn't question herself. I think at times she knows when to seek advice from others, which is really important. But most of the time, even when she comes to me as her daughter with any kind of questions or what do you think about this, I tell her to trust her instincts, because they're usually pretty spot on.
Amazing. And I think whenever you're talking about your mom, I feel like so much of this translates to you.
Let's hope.
No, I mean, with your art, you can tell, you can see very easily, in my opinion, that it is very outspoken. It is very different from a lot of the other artists that we're seeing these days. And I think with each new series comes something really fresh and somewhat spontaneous, if I could say.
Absolutely.
And I think there's a lot of interweavings within each work that you're creating. So I feel like a lot of this has maybe translated from your mother and just growing up under her wing, technically.
I think that you are very correct in that statement. Mm-hmm. There's definitely, I wouldn't feel as comfortable as expressing sometimes a little bit more of an austere or vulgar, message if it weren't for being raised by a woman who taught me to be unapologetically myself. So you're right. And definitely the credit goes to my mother. Her name's Gada, by the way. So
thank you, Gada.
Thank you, Gada. We love you.
Amazing. And I'll touch on my next question from there then, since we're talking about your art in your series now. Is there something, because you've done now a number of series, and each has its own identity within your technique, which is the silicone drawings and some sort of main motif within a series or message. Is there something that you see within a shift in your life, or is there like that brain blast moment where you say, oh, this is it, this is the next series? Do you see any sort of pattern there with these moments?
I mean, that's a very fantastic question. I should say one thing. Even you mentioned the silicone and the textured, my signature drawing, my signature style. I started drawing some version of these drawings when I was about 13, 14, so 8th grade going into high school. And then from there, I still have many of the drawings, pieces of paper, things like that I can see how my style has shifted and changed and kind of molded into what it is. And who knows, it could change more and more as time goes on. Roughly, you can look at the beginning to the end now and it's the same style, but it's kind of like taken its own shape. Mm-hmm. So that being said, that is obviously kind of the thread that goes between all of my bodies of work. It's always there, it always pervades each piece. But in terms of actual series, I will say this. When I first started as a professional contemporary artist, I always was very big on words, typography. I think that words hold a lot of power. And I was starting off making series that definitely had a lot of typographically driven things with my complementary designs in the background or in a specific shape or a strip. It was never, something that was kind of being gently hidden into the background like it is now. Right. And from there, I made a series that was called Birk Tones, and they were large-scale versions of Pantone swatches. that whole concept of something small made large, it just felt really good, and they were very successful. And from there, I kind of took that concept and continued to grow it. So small things made large. It went from the Pantone swatches to then the periodic table of elements to then my prescription sheets. We also then went into the large-scale fortune cookie sheets. And now we've arrived at the latest, which is the Lotería cards.
Yes.
So I think that psychologically for a lot of people, things that are small made big, they somehow seep in more. It's the same thing in reverse effect. Something really big, when it's made small, people love that.
Put it into their own personal perspective.
Right. There's something about taking the size of something that really makes people hone in on what it is you're trying to do. I mean, there's even entire, Instagram accounts and things like this of people doing everything mini, like a mini cooking set, a mini. So
yes.
There is something psychologically where that sticks. And once I started with the Pantone swatches, my brain was just kind of hungry for like, oh, what's the next thing? And every time I thought I was going to struggle with like, what's another small thing I can make large? It just naturally from one to the next would just kind of roll into it. And, I think that tends to happen a lot with my work. While I'm making pieces, a new idea will be sparked as to what the next body of work should be. And it's usually in the process of doing it. That being said, now Lotería, sometimes I talk about this being the last of the small made large kind of series. But of course, we never know. I don't like to put any dampers on anything because my brain is just really like a fleur with all the different things you could do.
Well, and I think you are also a wordsmith. I mean,
thank you. That's
everyone
great.
can hear how she speaks. She's very eloquent.
Thank you, guys.
You see these little messages that are intertwined with each piece, and I think it's especially within the Lotería series. Before we go into that, was there something specific within the Lotería cards, or did you just stumble upon it and it was like immediate, this is it, or tell us about that moment specifically.
Okay, so after this being, let's see, we said Pantone, the periodic table, the scriptures, the fortunate. So this is the fifth of small things made large. I grew up in Florida, as you know, Florida-based artist, and Lotería cards are very prevalent for us. We have a scratch off, that's them. I see them a lot. And I've now realized that they're made. A lot of people don't know what they are, but they feel familiar to them, which we can touch on in a moment. But when I had the idea, okay, Lotería cards, like this could work. The whole concept of Lotería, which a lot of people might not know, is Mexican bingo. Instead of a 5x5 card, it's a 4x4 card. And instead of bingo balls that tell you what to mark off, it's the cards themselves. So Lotería seemed really like a great concept to me because it was a game of luck, right? It's a game of chance. And I never like to take the easy road to do anything. And I always kind of like to make a statement that's very juxtaposed. So in terms of the Lotería, I thought, okay, if this is a game of luck, the actual game, and all the normal cards are usually like the hand, the boot, the umbrella, just simple icons. I wanted it to instead be elements of luxury. I wanted them to be each card to represent the juxtaposition of luck. So when we have a lot of luxury items or things of high class, right? Even behind us, as you can see, we have Las Floras, we have the Louis Vuitton bag, all of these different objects that are of eloquence, you don't just get them by luck in most cases.
Right.
You have to work for them, right? You have to work hard to then be able to afford these types of things. And even some of the different, ideas I've chosen for the pieces, they aren't necessarily always so obvious. Like the Birkin bag that I have, there's also La Mente, which is the mind, because there are a lot of things that you don't just get to achieve with money. It also has to be something you work for. So to have a good mindset and the way life works for you, like that is also something you have to work for. It doesn't just come from luck. So the whole series was the juxtaposition of luck versus skill or working hard for something.
Fabulous, honestly.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's nice that you all are seeing the various pieces that we have behind us, because I think it represents the series very well. There are a lot of these elements that are either from contemporary art, which is so fun, and your little spin on them, and the lifestyle of maybe someone who lives a more luxurious life, or just someone who works really hard, like La Mente. I think it's fabulous.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
when you go, can you explain? Let's pick one, for example. Maybe
Las Flores,
Las
right?
Flores?
Because I think that they can see it best.
Yes. Can you tell us the significance? Is there any significance in the number 12 in this piece?
Yes. Okay. So I would say, as we mentioned before with the Pantones and some of the other things that I've done, all of those, anytime there's numbers involved in a piece, I was never going to just make up a number. I'm not that person. I think that each thing has to have a little bit of extra meaning naturally.
Kind of like Da Vinci Code.
Right, yeah. So a lot of my
Cayla
pieces...
Birk code.
Right, exactly. It's my Birk code, exactly. And you know, it's funny because even it all really did start with the Birk tone pieces that, if anyone knows, Pantone swatches do have a number that's associated with them because now we use an algorithm to decipher each color. Everything is pretty much digitally done. Well, I didn't want to slap a bunch of random numbers onto a painting. Like, what fun is that? So that's how the alphanumeric ciphers started. And every piece since then, anything made large out of all these, they all usually have a number that's hidden in there that means something. So for these, because the only number that exists is in the corner, they each have separate meanings. So for the example of Las Flores, those flowers that are in the piece, they are done by Takashi Murakami. And he's a very famous artist, for those of you who don't know. And these flowers have kind of become one of his main symbols. And he is Japanese. So the flowers themselves represent the regrowth after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which is very powerful in itself. Yeah. And he even makes them approachable in this character-like, very colorful way, even though they're representing something beautiful, but from a very dark place, you know, right. Flowers regrowing from what once you cannot grow from.
And even the fact that they have this beautiful wide smile.
I know.
Like
I mean,
vivacious energy.
It's incredible. It really is. And so he, being a very highly collected artist and someone who his works are on the more eloquent luxury side, that's why I chose it. But the 12 is actually because all of his flowers, they always have 12 petals. Ah. There's not a reason why it's 12. It's not because there's like 12 districts or anything. It's literally, that's always his thing. So I figured it was a little bit of an homage to him to kind of re-back up that 12. And they are sitting in a mason jar, which lovingly says Birk on it because I had to hide a little bit of myself in there as well. And each piece, you know, as well as them being called something, Las Flores, the flowers, they always have a subtext. And as you said before, me and words, usually it's a little bit of an austere comment. So at the bottom of that one, it says, if a flower bloomed in a dark room, would you trust it? Which is from actually a Kendrick Lamar song about poetic justice. But I thought that that was just so symbolic of the flowers themselves being that representation of growth after the bombing. So I wanted to kind of add a little extra nod to it. So that way people do wonder, like, why would she say that? Because it's not a painting of a sad flower that's like regrowing. It's a very happy thing. So that's why that one has all these different parts. And each one, their numbers represent different things.
Amazing. I think it's so intelligent and so interesting. And I think the little sayings at the bottom are kind of like the icing on the cake of the piece. It's like that last little...
That little swish at the end.
Yes.
Well, and also I think for me, it's not always easy to choose what I want them to say. And you're right, I think that is kind of the icing because I go through a lot of options of, well, what do we want that subtext to say? Because you don't want it to be cheesy, you want it to be just right. And to find that middle ground isn't always the easiest, but it does bring me joy. It's nice. I think that as much as people's brains tickle a little bit from looking at my art, it tickled for me to create it, which is good. And I kind of want that to be something that always pervades and connects me with the observer of the work.
Amazing. And just to go back a little bit too, we have a collector that's very interested in these works as well. And his favorite is one that makes a little bit more of a nostalgia. It's the Kith piece. So even some of these pieces that they represent items, I think it's interesting that they can instigate these feelings of this memory wrapped around, you know, it could be a good time, it could be, you know, something that's a regular, you know, moment in their life when they're traveling.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I think it's just really fun, the whole series.
Thank you. I'm glad. And I you know, I think that there are so many times in which people observe a series of art, and the whole point is that art is subjective. Some people want to admit that and some people don't, but that's the beautiful thing of it. You know, how many times have you walked into an art fair and someone's talking and they said, well, I could have done that. And the answer is always, but you didn't, you know? And I think that there's something really beautiful about that when it comes to art, especially these days. I do try to make sure though, when people see my art, they're like, I have no idea how to do that, right? We want a little bit of a step up in that way. But I think that's one of the most beautiful things about art is that it is open to interpretation. And I like that you said that sometimes it's those colloquial moments that it also represents, which are not things that come from luck either. They have to come from within, right? You have to be open and feel a certain way in order to absorb that kind of feeling.
And there is so many elements that can be open for interpretation in
Absolutely.
your pieces, from the main figure, the main motif, to the title, for example, even perhaps the number. And then you dive deeper into the piece and you see all these, I call them doodles. I hope that's not offensive.
No. And I love it. I have to stop and laugh on that one because it's funny. So many people say to me, I call them doodles. Does that offend you? I'm like, no, not at all. And I've had people say, oh, they remind me of Keith Haring, or one of my good friends calls them squiggles. She's like, I'm sorry, I know they're not squiggles. They say a lot, but they're just like, they're the squiggles. And I'm like, it's whatever name you want to give it is fine. Lovingly, when people sit there and kind of read one thing and then they say, oh, is that and you get sucked in, we call that getting burked. It's like you got burked. You're in there, your brain is like, oh,
It's like the subconscious of the piece.
And it's definitely in the beginning of being an artist, I think sharing some of those and kind of observing people look. I mean, when I first started, the art would be in fairs and stuff. I would have to walk away because I didn't know how I felt about people seeing such a deep part of my brain. It's very much almost like a journal entry, each one. They're showing the way I feel. They're showing a lot of emotion. And at first I was like, oh, I didn't know if I liked watching other people go through the process. And now it is one of my biggest joys. And I
fly on the wall, of course.
Yes. I'm always just quiet in the corner. I oftentimes will not even, I'll just stand there and no one knows I'm the artist, which I prefer. But I've had a lot of clients come to me and collectors who tell me, I've lived with your piece in my house for 5 years and every day I find something new. And that, it really melts my heart. I'm like, that's great, because so often, there's Rick Rubin says, once a piece of art has been understood, it loses its allure, it loses its value to you. It's like once it's understood, the art is now boring. You no longer want to be a part of it. And I never want that to happen. I would like people to feel a sense of, oh, I'm always intrigued because there's always something new to see.
To unlock.
Yeah, unlock. That's a great way to put it, Laura.
Well, and I will say that even if the owner of the piece has unlocked everything, or maybe they think they have, it's always interesting. They think they have. Not yet. It's always interesting to pivot this piece to your conversation piece, and just like you get joy from seeing the viewers of your pieces understanding it, or trying to unlock it for the first time. They can do this with all their guests that come to their home. And I have so many clients and collectors that are telling me about their works that they've acquired, and it becomes almost a game and something interesting that they can do with people that come to their home. So
it's amazing.
Yeah,
I she started off as a collector, and now she's basically like a second mother to me. Her name is Pam, last name is Meyer, and she was looking at one of my pieces and she saw that written in there. It said Meyer, and it was actually for Meyer Lemon. And she's like, does this piece say Meyer? And it's just funny because the piece has been on her wall forever, and I made it before ever knowing her. And it says Meyer, and it was for Meyer Lemon. It was about cleaning, and it was this very funny little quote. And she said to me the other day, that piece has been on my wall for all these years. And isn't it funny that it says Meyer and we never realized it? And I'm like, yeah, she acquired that piece, and I didn't even know her then. And it's just interesting to see how life really spits out those interesting little moments.
Wow. I did want to also ask you, whenever you are creating pieces in your studio, I know a lot of them have, as you mentioned in Las Flores, kind of whispers of lyrics. Is there a specific playlist? I know you're really into more like rap and R&B. Is there any specific playlists or artists that you love to listen to, must have on your stereo or in your headphones when you're creating?
Okay, so great question.
Let's dive into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, I was like, this is where it gets real in this interview, guys. Okay, so although I do love hip hop and R&B and everything, the truth is I am just a lover of music in general. I'm also quite a huge fan of a lot of classic rock. I'm a huge jazz fan, Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald. I'll dive old, new. I mean, I really don't hold any grudges on anyone. I'm not the biggest country fan, but I do like some of it. I like a little bit more of a blues, folky, like bluegrass sound, which is still in essence part of a country umbrella, I should say.
The original country.
Yeah, it is the original, exactly. So I'm always very open to all different kinds of music. And actually, when I'm creating in my studio, I've gone through phases where sometimes I now will do podcasts or things. I very much can just absorb, whatever's being said to me while I'm doing it, because it's such a second nature at this point. It's almost like driving. When I'm creating art, especially when I was younger, I have friends sometimes who will come into the studio and say, "Can I talk to you while you're doing this?" Or like, "Are you okay if I talk to you?" Like, yeah, absolutely. I just might not respond instantly, but I'm absorbing everything you're saying. So I've made some switches because at times I think constantly trying to seek out new music becomes a very daunting task.
Right.
You want it to be natural, and I don't want any of my joy about music to be taken from me just because, people need to have new music constantly. So I've done some switches back and forth, but I do have some golden, like maybe 3 artists that I, no matter what, if I ever get stuck, I'm like, I can always put on. I should really say some albums. So one will be The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, one of my all-time favorites, either that or also the Fugees' Ready or Not album. Both fantastic, and just
agreed.
In every way I can never be upset. Like if I can't figure out what I want to listen to, I'm like, okay, well, I can just put on Lauren. She always just does it for me. And if it's something a bit on the softer side, I would say probably Billie Holiday. I know, both female though. I've never really thought about that being the congruency, is that they are 2 females. And then, everyone's going to think like, why did you choose a soundtrack? But it's just because it does encompass everything. I am a Forrest Gump soundtrack kind of girl. I mean, that's just like all of your favorite classics of anything classic rock. And there's something about the 1960s and just like a entire like civil rights era that is so powerful, and all the music it just feels so good to listen to. It's the things, and I think about this sometimes, where obviously I grew up in the 90s. So there's a lot of music that one day, should I have children, I'm like, I can't play Mystical to my kids. Like, what am I gonna, what's gonna happen there? And you
That's
never know.
That's a big question mark. I mean, we turned out okay.
You know what? To each his own, right? We turned out great. It's fine. But I think that you can now, when I think about the kind of music I want to show my children of like what musical artistry is, I do tend to think towards a lot of things from the 1960s. It depends. My mother raised us with like a lot of eclectic different types of music. Obviously, she grew up in Arabic as her first language, but when we were younger, there was a time when a female Arabic artist, Alabina is her name, she did an entire album with people in Spanish, like including like Carlos Santana and some other people. So my mom always raised us with like having a very open mind as to music, even in different languages. And that's definitely transpired to me now, even when it comes to rap or hip hop. I enjoy English rap, English hip hop, French music. Like I'm very open. I just am so excited when someone shows me music that I'm like, this makes me feel a certain way. I think we're living in a postmodern crisis, right? So everything is kind of always being resampled or reused. And that applies to not only art, but obviously music as well, where you have DJs, everything's sampled and remixed, and Elton John's famous song now got redone with Dua Lipa, and it's just like we're living in a world where nothing is new and original.
But you said something interesting. You said it makes you feel a certain way.
It makes me feel a certain way.
You always want that feeling, and I think it's with art, with music. You want to connect with the viewer or the listener or the observer feels it, and it shifts them. It shifts their mood, shifts their personality, their thinking process. That was.
I mean, I'm sure that you can agree as well. Sometimes, even if, I wake up and I'm not in the greatest mood, or I feel stressed or things like that, I think that a song can really transport you out of your mood into a different way. And sometimes when I'm very stressed, I actually tend to like sit in silence. I didn't realize that until I got older, because I love music so much. In my mind, I'm like, music's always playing, probably because it is. But as I got older, I realized sometimes when I'm stressed, like I will have taken a 40-minute car ride and I haven't turned on any music because my thoughts can be quite loud at times.
Right.
And I've had to come sometimes a little bit check myself of, okay, we're in a bad mood. Like you need to recognize that. And then this can be fixed by, a little bit of Ella Fitzgerald or something like that. So it really is very powerful in that sense. And that's the feeling that I think you're striving for.
Amazing. And I think to hone in on that as well, you can also fix that with art in your walls. Just as you can with music in your ears, when you have these visual elements in your home, and I'm speaking it from someone who is a young collector. I just started, putting what I would call real art on my walls from artists that I know and care about and know their journey or have collected from different dealers. Well, Philippe and I, we always collect what we like. And that's what we always tell our collectors as well, to really strive for something that truly speaks to you. Because when you are living with art, that is, captivates you from the moment you see it truly,
Yeah,
it's going to do that every time you see it. You're going
Very
to live with
true.
the art. It's going to shift as soon as you wake up and you see something that's has moved you before and will continue to move you when you you take it on every new time. It is a new way of living in your own home, I have to say.
I mean, that's such a beautiful sentiment because I agree. I really do. I've always kind of told people, because when you tell someone you're an artist, they have a lot of questions, like what kind of artist, and then they have many questions about the art world. And so often people ask me, well, like, how do you know what art to buy? And I always tell them there's a difference between art that you like, art that you hang in your home, and then art that you're buying because you feel it's an investment.
Right.
Usually the question that's coming to me is from an investment standpoint. Well, how do you know what art to buy that's then going to blow up, is what people are asking.
Right.
But the reality is, I think that it's really, I didn't realize that you and Philippe tell people to choose the things they love. My mother is the same way. She's a collector in that same instance. She will not buy something that doesn't make her feel great. Does she still change out the art in her home and acquire new things and shift things around? Of course. But she always says you have to have that like spark, that feeling.
Yeah. Even if it's an investment piece. Look, I mean, that can be the first element if you want the investment side of it.
A lot of people jump into the art world in that way, just as it's a commodity.
Right. But then my undertaking is that, well, first of all, I'm not going to show you something that I don't believe is a good investment, whether it's an artist that's young in their career or an artist that's, either passed away or very established in their career. The next step, and I think the most important step, is, do you like it? Do you want to invest in this artist? Do you want to invest in their journey, especially when you're talking about a young artist? I think there's something truly beautiful in that. And
it's great that you're getting collectors to also, a lot of people don't want to answer that question for themselves because it requires a lot of introspective thought. And like, do you like this? They're like, oh my gosh.
Call my designer.
Yeah, like call my designer. Exactly. Call my designer. I don't know if I like it. I'm not sure. But that's good because it does force people to have that introspective aspect of them. And then when they really decide that they do like a piece, you're probably correct. It's so much more rewarding for them to know, like, I like this. This is like, an extension of me. And that's really lovely. That's such a great approach, honestly, to art. And that's why I'm here with you, you know, guys.
That's why we're here together.
That's why we're here, because we agree.
Yes, and the gallery exists because of this. So I think we've really touched on everything. I wanted, people that know your work, that have never seen your work, I want them to understand that there is a person behind the painting. There's a beautiful face. There is an incredible brain. So is there any last things that you want to leave our viewers with?
Every time I get asked this, it's like the moment where you panic of like, what should I say? And it's like, are these my last words? Kind of a pressure.
No, there can be another.
No, yeah. You know what? All I would say, because I guess the nice thing to leave everyone off on is, as I said in the beginning of this conversation, I always felt creative and I liked creativity, and then creativity started to like me. And I think the truth is in my life as an artist, I have never, I've held other jobs before. I never believed that I would have one job for the rest of time. And this is something that I've just really found is akin to my soul and I feel passionate about. So the only thought I'll leave all of our viewers with is stay tuned. because I don't plan on stopping anytime soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you
your
for having me.
insight, and until the next time.
Sounds good, guys.
Bye.